Hi, my name is Nick. I'm making a documentary. See? I'm a senior at Louisiana State University in Baton Rouge. I study English and the audiovisual arts here, and I lived here my sophomore year, but it just didn't take, so I had to go back home to the country. New Roads, the booming metropolis of Louisiana. It's about 25 miles north of Baton Rouge, and I am lying when I say it is huge. Just look at all these cars passing back and forth. You know this is home to at least a couple thousand people. I went to school here at Falls River Academy. My graduating class held a whopping 55 people. I had my first dead-end job here, but I'm not from here.
Oh, I feel it in my head. What you looking for?
That's my dad. That's a crawfish. My dad's a crawfisherman in Glynn, Louisiana, and that's where I'm from. I live there with my mother, father, brother, and sister. Believe it or not, I actually like it. Glynn was settled and named after Major Martin Glynn, my great-great-grandfather. He came here from Galway, Ireland in the early 1800s. He initially settled in New Orleans, where he started his own grocery and syrup business. But after the Civil War, he decided to make his way up north and try his stakes in farming. He decided to settle about 15 miles north of Baton Rouge, and what is now Glynn. Just imagine Glynn's in that white spot, where there isn't anything. Glynn bought an old plantation home on the west side of the Mississippi River, and he had it expanded to fit his wife and 11 children. That's about all I know about him, and that's why I'm doing this documentary. I want to know what my great-great-grandfather did in life. Glenwood's not very far from my house, and while I've spent a lot of time there, I haven't really done any research or really looked into the history of the place, so I thought that might be a logical best place to start. You could really get lost in this place. That is, until you see a boombox, or a TV, or a computer. Well, much of the house is still intact, and it still looks pretty good, and some of the modern additions are nice, like the new library, which I scoured. Every book had some information about my grandfather doing work on the levee board, or in construction of levees and repairing of levees. I wondered, could my great-great-grandfather have had anything to do with the construction of the levees around Baton Rouge? Baton Rouge. Big city. I grew up 30 miles from here out west, but I came here a lot, and I had a ton of friends who lived here. Friends who never missed an opportunity to call me a redneck. It was frustrating. Besides, everyone knows rednecks aren't from Louisiana. They're from Mississippi. Louisianians are called coonasses. Imagine this great city with no levee, constantly flooding. Okay, maybe it wouldn't have been quite this bad, but I think you get my point. People from the city love to mock us country folk, but wouldn't it be great if someone from out in the country were responsible for the well-being of those in the city? You ready for some high-quality interviewing?
I think so.
It was time to take a drive along New Road's claim to fame, the beautiful Falls River. My father recommended I visit a historian named Brian Costello, author of 14 books on parish and state history. Besides being just about the nicest guy I've met, Brian had a ton of information for me. He also had some pictures of the old floods back in the 1900s, as well as a few surprises.
Kankakee is on the recessive shore of the Mississippi River, which means that it kept eating on this side and giving to the West Louisiana side.
Yeah. So all the work benefited the west side of the river because the east side.
As he was active in closing the Morganza crevasse during high water some years ago. This is a map of that break in the levee. It's a part of the levee that stayed open for many years in the 1860s, 70s, and 80s until Major Martin Glynn was able to have it closed. And as long as this one stayed open every year, the water was high, would flood Point Capee, West Baton Rouge, and on down. But in his day, he was a wonderful contribution, not only to Point Capee, but to the whole river system in this area. And at a time when there wasn't much government funding for a lot of these projects, I think he expended a lot of his own personal sums into improving the levees and the roads in this parish as well, for which he was never compensated. So we owe that debt of gratitude to him also.
There's a good chance you haven't heard of Morganza. Like New Roads and Glynn, it's in Point Capee Parish on the west side of the Mississippi River. My mother was from Morganza. In fact, my grandmother still lives there today. Her parents, as well as my grandfather's parents, came to Morganza from Europe at the turn of the century. This would have been shortly after Martin Glynn's work on the levees. If not for a certain Irishman, the government may not have been able to repair that Morganza levee, and perhaps my grandparents would have never met, meaning that the whole Serio family, my mother, and myself would never have existed. I wanted to end this documentary with me pointing at the city and laughing. I wanted hundreds of thousands of people to owe my family their life. This is much better than that. It's very doubtful that my mother's ancestors would have settled in a flood-ravaged town when there were so many other places to go. The possibilities of my and my family's non-existence are endless. Because of that, I wanted to end the movie with what might not have been had my great-grandfather not done what he did. Maybe the world would be better off without us, without another family constantly breeding, taking up space, and pumping out carbon dioxide. But I don't really care. We're here. Even with these last 3 days of editing, which have turned me into a complete nut job, I've had a great time working on this documentary. I got to learn a lot of things about my great-great-grandfather, and, I want to say one of those things that you don't say because it sounds cheesy, like, I value my family more, but I value my family more. And overall, I just felt good to be alive.
Take a touchdown, buddy! Oh.